are Extra Bases with Bristol and Booth in studio. Jason Bristol and former Major League scout Jeremy Booth are KHOU 11 baseball analysts. Yes, we are here to talk the state of the Astros. And Jeremy, as this team continues to look for a general manager, here's the tweet Jeremy sent out earlier. I've been silent long enough. Tonight I'll be live on KHOU 11 digital platforms to discuss the current state of the Astros, all things impacting the GM search, and what should be the plan to go forward for this organization. Jason, let's ride. Now, Jeremy, I know I haven't let you talk yet.
I'm trying to share this, so.
Okay. So, Jeremy, just so we stay on topic, I've written these things down. Current state, things impacting search, and what the plan should be. Now, right. To get us started, Jeremy, how would you characterize the general manager search right now for the Houston Astros?
Interesting. It's interesting because, these candidates in some ways have some unifying traits, and then they're in some other ways all over the map, right? I mean, you've got a guy whose name we heard today in James Harris, who has an analytical background in football or in baseball, and that's fine, but been in baseball about 6 years, maybe. Kind of a fast riser with Cleveland, but was a football guy before that. And you would think at that amount of time doesn't have the background or experience to do what this needs. Has some connections into the commissioner's office. We'll leave it there, with that. And obviously has his name in the hat. Now, that's not taken away from him. That's just a state of what he brings to the table. And then on the other side, you got a guy like Brad Ausmus, who's a lifer player who, has been a bench coach. He's been a special advisor. He has been a manager.
He's always been a friend of Jeff Bagwell's.
Right. And you look at that and you're like, man, well, those two don't even connect in the same stratosphere, right? Of like what you would have for this position. So in one sense, I think the tone of this search is going to be called diversity. And the reason why I say diversity is because just looking at that, diversity means, well, we all have this connotation of skin color or of gender or of whatever. Like, maybe, you could have a cow in your front office and that would be technically diverse. You know what I mean? The reality is that diversity just means different backgrounds, it means different. And when you're looking at that, diversity from that standpoint is always a good thing. Some of the reason why we're here at this timeline, frankly, Jason, is because Jim Crane said by February 1st.
Yep.
That's why we're here, okay? The last time this happened with James Click, it was February 1st. And it happened that because, not by design, but it happened that way because of the sign stealing scandal and the subsequent firings, and there wasn't a whole lot of time to do that. And so I think Jim got locked into that, into that time frame, and felt he didn't want to rush, and that was his deal. With that comes a little bit of an interesting slate of who you're going to talk to. You have some people who are going to be available and some people who are not going to be available. You have a trend in the game now that is correctly going away from all analysts. You have, coming off an analytically inclined, I think, two front offices, that's fair to say, with Jeff Luhnow and James Click. While they won at the big league level, which is totally fine, the analytics don't build the system. The analytics don't build player development like that. Matter of fact, when you look at some of the Astros player development wins and losses in the last 10 years, let's just say since 2015, there's been several. There's been a few, but there hasn't been many. And certainly not the players that have come in. You look at the Astros drafts, and you got a guy like Chas McCormick, who's a great pick, 3.6 WAR. I'm not a big WAR believer just because you can manipulate that any way you want. But when it comes to that, you have to take it into account. And the guy's a heck of a pick in the 21st round.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
21st round.
21st round.
Yeah. It's a heck of a pick there. I mean, he's done better than some of the first rounders. But when it comes to the early picks, these guys have been abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not counting 20 and 21 because that wasn't the scouting department's fault. But when you come to the rest of that, it's been abysmal. So the current state of why we're here, I think, is following the timeline that he set out and trying to get to a position where whatever decision was made was going to be one that was thorough from Jim Crane's standpoint. That's kind of where I would stop for why we're here today.
Let's go over the reported candidates at this time. James Harris is one of the newer names from the Guardians front office. Dana Brown, a member of the Nationals front office. Or excuse me, the Braves front office. Excuse me, he was with the Nationals, now with the Braves. Sorry about that. Bobby Evans, former San Francisco Giants general manager. Brad Ausmus, former Major League manager and former Astros catcher. Those are the big four, you think?
Yeah.
I don't feel like I've missed anyone.
Well, I think you got to start with Michael Hill.
Oh, Michael Hill, yes, Michael Hill. But Ken Rosenthal reported that Michael Hill took himself out of the running.
Is this where I get to say what I know?
All right. Now, if any of you have comments, questions for Jeremy, leave them below. I've got it scrolling right here. So yes, Jeremy, this is where you can tell us what you know.
Michael Hill's got a pretty good gig in the commissioner's office, and there was less chance of a fish, better chance of a fish getting this job than Michael Hill taking it. I mean, look, the reality is that he's a qualified guy. He's a former president of baseball operations, speaks multiple languages, Harvard educated, got World Series rings, been player development. I mean, the guy's phenomenally qualified for this stuff. And what happened to him in New York a couple years ago, after he was let go by Derek Jeter's group in Miami, he goes to New York, he takes this job as the commissioner, and Sandy Alderson, as much as I love Sandy and known him since I was a kid, he had no interest, and Michael was in and out, and it was just it was a bad, and I think disrespectful in some ways, interview to Michael Hill. He's a excellent candidate, but I'm not going to go beyond that. But I knew for a fact he wasn't taking this job. The minute James Click was let go, he wasn't taking this job. Would have been good for it, not him. So you kind of take that type of ilk and you look at what Michael Hill brings to the table. Executive with prior experience in the chair. That's a big one, and I'll go into that later on as we go down the line. Prior experience in the chair. You have somebody who's been involved in player development and been successful at it. You have somebody who's been involved in draft rooms. You have somebody who, in Michael Hill's style, he lets his people work that are working with him, but he also always verifies, right? And that's what leadership really is. It's not about doing. It's about putting people in place to succeed and then making sure they stay on track when it comes to baseball operations, right? So that's kind of what Michael Hill has done, and he did it in the biggest chair in the department at a very tough situation. The Marlins haven't had the best situation year in and year out. Yeah, they won a couple World Series, and he was there for them, but they haven't done the best type of job to keep that team ready to compete every year in and year out, regardless of stadium. And it wasn't the best situation in the world for a World Series, perennial World Series winner to exist. So, when you have that, that type of guy, you got to start there, and you got to start looking at why was this guy somebody that they should be talking to. And I'm going to say this as well. He got blasted by a lot of Twitter, and it was completely unfair. If you blasted Michael Hill on Twitter, what's that thing? Show me you don't know what you're talking about, or tell me you don't know what you're talking about without telling me. There's no reason to blast Michael Hill. If you blast him, you're completely uninformed. Now, when it comes to this city's still clamoring for Luna. I guess that's kind of
Jeff Luhnow. A lot of people believe.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, he brought a World Series here, and he was really a major part of the architect for the second time. So you can't dispute that. No one has, and no one's ever taken away the success of what they've done at the big league level. The reasons for knocking Jeff Luhnow were not big league success. It was for how he treated people and for the culture, and that is certainly borne out in Brandon Taubman. It bore out in the sign stealing scandal. It's still his team. It's his front office. It bore out in a number of ways that verified what what I was saying and what Jason was listening to and backing up is about how bad the culture was. But it doesn't mean they did a bad job at the big league level. Now you got to go to James Click, and I'm going to work him backwards into this. Okay, you got to James Click. So here comes James Click, and it's analytics. Okay, James, nice guy, really is. I like James, nice guy. But what James didn't do was he didn't hire any diversity. Remember, there's diversity being different backgrounds and different schools of thought. Didn't hire any diversity. didn't have a chance to make any kind of headway in the draft. I mean, 2 of the 3 years he was here, he was reeling with no picks, and one of those drafts was a 5-round draft, right? So he didn't really have. You can't really kind of judge him on that. But he contributed to the bullpen. He did an excellent job of helping to see this organization through a very tough time, infighting, not infighting. James Click did an excellent job of making sure that things stayed steady and the team that was good at the big league level stayed good at the big league level. By the time he had a chance to put some fingerprints and stuff underneath, he was gone. And a lot of being the GM at different points in any place has to do with timing, which we'll come back around to then as well. So you have Jeff Luhnow, who stepped in as a timing piece behind Bobby Wade or Bobby Heck and Ed Wade, who built the entire system. And we can argue about this all we want, I guess, but it's pointless. You got Kyle Tucker, you got Alex Bregman, you got some pitching that came from Ozzo Campo and the Latin scouting crew. You've got Hunter Brown, we'll see. He just got here, we'll see. You know what I mean? And you've got Jeremy Pena and McCormick. Now you find me some other guys out of the system in a decade. And there's some hurt feelings over there in the scouting department, and I mean like ridiculously hurt feelings in the scouting department. But you know what my answer is to that? Do a better job. That's my answer to that. Do a better job. It's public record. Like, my reports are public record. The events we put on at Future Star Series are public record. You know what? When you go draft somebody, it's public record. And if you're going to get personal about some things like that because you ain't handling your business, I can't help you with that. At the end of the day, let's go down the first round pick since Bobby Heck left. Can we go down memory lane?
How about this? How about we do things impacting the search?
But that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
I'm tying all this together.
All righty.
So let's go down.
Because I'm getting a sense here that people are waiting for this.
And I'm going to that.
Things
and this is why.
impacting the search.
And this is why. So here we go. 2013 first round pick, Mark Appel.
Big leaguer. He is.
That's great. Is it drafting big leaguers or is it winning championships? All right, so Mark Appel, it's a miss. Good job for him. Great guy. Got some big leagues, happy for him. You know, did some stuff in business, had to step away from the game to get back. Great story. Not a hit for 1-1. Not a hit. 2014, Brady Aiken. Okay? We all know the story there, but he turns into Alex Bregman the next year.
Yes.
Okay, so you have Alex Bregman in 2015. Now you have Kyle Tucker at 5. That's a win.
Oh,
that's a win.
One of the best drafts of the decade.
That's a win in 2015. Okay, good for them. You have 2016 was Forrest Whitley, correct?
Getting it. Yep.
2017 was JB Bukowskis. 2018 was my favorite one, Seth Beer. 2019 was Corey Lee. Just got here. I haven't been the biggest fan in him where he was drafted. Now, if he was a 3rd or 4th rounder, and I'd feel better. But Corey Lee is 2019. We'll find out, right? 2020, no picks. 2021, no picks at the top. And 2022, Drew Gilbert, who's actually one of our guys and from the series. And I feel, I said then that was a good pick, and we're happy for him. I miss anybody?
Nope, you're right. Forrest Whitley in 16, Bukowskis in 17, Seth Beer in 18, Corey Lee in 19.
So what the scouting department has done is draft complementary pieces because that's the system that they're using. And we've been talking about this for a while about drafting aircraft carriers. Now, this is impacting the search.
How so?
Because you can't keep the team competitive by drafting complementary pieces. I was in Seattle with the Mariners. Wasn't a scouting director, but we drafted a lot of big leaguers as a group. Our scouting director did a really good job of drafting big leaguers. Did I miss the parades? We didn't win. And the reality is that if you have a chance to take a Tim Anderson and you take a DJ Peterson, for example, it's a miss. It doesn't matter why, it's a miss. If you have a chance to do that year in and year out, of Danny Holtzen, for example, in 2000. So it's public record. It doesn't make people bad scouts. It doesn't make people bad people unless they put the team behind their own personal. That's a problem. But when it comes to like the scouting side of things and what you're looking in leadership, that stuff's impacting the search. Now, when you have a Jeff Bagwell and a Reggie Jackson and a Craig Biggio, because he's in the circle, and you have a
Enos Cabell,
okay, and you've got a Dusty Baker, and I guess you could put Jose Cruz Sr. in there sometimes if you felt like it,
yeah.
Right? But think about how many owners are out there in the game and how diverse a group that is of former players. right? We can come back to this word, diversity, right? So that's excellent with the group of players that people that he has, that this owner has around him. I got to give him a lot of credit. Not too many owners do that. He's got just a wide breadth of it. And frankly, I will say this, Jim Crane's been really maligned at times nationally for some of the stuff that has happened in his companies. I haven't seen that one bit. Now, I've seen some of the people he hired be pretty myopic with what they do, but I haven't seen him do it, right? And so when you look at that type part of thing, the guy's done a good job running businesses and running his organization. And tying this back to impacting the search, it's about a fit. And so what Jim Crane's doing is he's taking his time. Now, Major League Baseball is 100% absolutely influencing some of the candidates, okay? And I'm saying that because not as a knock, people got to get names from somewhere, okay? But the amount of diverse in the connotation meaning candidates interviewing for this is fun to see. It's nice to see that. It's nice to see that and I'll just address the thing. It's as a person of color in this game who has seen some things go the other direction. It's nice to see that happening. But diversity, for the sake of diversity, isn't the right way to do it. Nobody that looks like me or isn't or be classified as diverse wants a job simply because of how you look. You don't want that. You want to be the best person for the job. And I'm not saying these guys aren't qualified. Michael Hill, I just told you, excellent. Okay. All these guys have some level of qualification. But impacting the search is timetable, diversity with outside influences as to who they're talking to. There really is no rhyme or reason in these candidates. And the fact that you have a lot of different voices in there because the leadership alongside Jim Crane, who, by the way, has a lot to deal with no president, no CEO, no GM, with a scouting department that has not done a good job, and a player development department that Jeff Bagwell's been on record of saying, similar to stuff that we said, has not done a good job. There's a lot going on over there. They also have the smallest baseball operations staff in the game. And that started with Jeff Luhnow. So there's a lot to rebuild and a lot to do, and I think that it's a little overwhelming. I think some of the candidates that have been involved have been influenced by other people. I think there's a criteria that they need to be looking at we'll get to when you ask me about it. But I think he's taking his time to satisfy a lot of different masters and input to figure it out, because James Click, as good a job as he did of helping keep that club there for where they were, but just not messing it up at the big league level. Like, if we just say that, he just didn't mess it up. He kept them steady. He wasn't the right guy to go forward with this group, and they felt like he wasn't really the right guy last year. Otherwise, some of the things he wanted to do get done, and he's still here. So all those things, the Luhnow scandals, the lack of diversity in baseball operations hiring, the input other places to build a network, the way that Jim Crane wants to operate his organization, and let's be clear about this, when we're talking about any city and their team, because especially here, because there's a sense of ownership here and identity and love for the players. And man, Houston is really special when it comes to that, right? It's really special, but it's Jim Crane's team. He owns it. He's writing the check. It's his team. And when it comes to that, he has the ability to make these decisions. So I think he's taking very extreme care in all of these areas to find the right guy. But I think there's a criteria he's got in mind. And if he's the businessman I think he is, and he's now the World Series winning owner, I think he is.
Two-time.
Their criteria is not what some of the guys that are getting a lot of the play fit. And it's not a knock, because, it's almost like a parent, and you can't really pick a kid, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say I know quite a few of these guys. Mm-hmm. So I have to I know, just in full disclosure, I know quite a few of these guys, and I'm not picking anybody. What I am going to say is I think there's a criteria for this particular job that that Jim Crane's got in mind, but he's just being extremely thorough with all the outside influences.
But why should he take this amount of time? Because I put this on Twitter. When you wait this long, you really put that new hire behind the eight ball. Now, granted, I looked this up, Jeremy. There have been a number of GM hires in February.
Yep.
I looked it up. Here's one, Paul DePodesta, Dodgers. He was one in February. So why is he taking this long? And second of all, will that hurt the person who ultimately takes the position?
Why he's taken this long, I can't answer. I think that it would have been a more traditional. Well, the why is because he said he wanted to be thorough and he wasn't in a
That's
rush.
true. That's true.
But
he did say he was going to take his time.
As far as the normalcy of operating in the baseball world, no, a lot of clubs have cutoffs at December 1st for even asking for people. Now, that's gotten later and later, and now it's January 1, and February 1 is ridiculously late. That's impossible. You got spring training 2 weeks away. But, you know, what I can say is that he said he was going to do it, and he's sticking to it. Okay, that's the why. Whether it was the best course of action, that's not up to us to say, because it's definitely different than what would usually go on. That's just the one he's chosen. You know, with that, I don't really have another answer, because there isn't one. Like, you know, if you fire James Click in November, you part ways, whatever that is, you would think you'd start that search pretty soon. But with this club, the big league club had a couple of pieces they needed to tweak. I think there were some things they could have done different behind the plate. There's some stuff they could have done different for pitching depth. I will say it's a risk relying on Hunter Brown and Lance McCullers, who, you know, Hunter Brown's never thrown more than 150 innings or up to 150 innings in an inning.
130.
130. You know, and now we're going to ask him to be a starter in the big leagues, and I think Lance McCullers has demonstrated that he's been a little injury prone and broken down. If you're really talking about a postseason in an era of 6-man rotations, which is what they have gone to, that's 6 guys, and maybe you can spread it out a little bit. But if anybody gets down, what do you got left? And so there's a little bit of pitching depth they should have addressed. You know, there's some infield depth that they addressed with the waiver claim from the Tigers, right? There's catching depth. Well, you know, they let Vasquez go to Minnesota. They didn't address it with a guy like Tucker Barnhart, which would have been low cost, or another guy like Dom Nunez. You know, these guys are pieces that can stay in AAA that come back and forth to help. And Barnhart's a pretty good piece, and they didn't do anything with that. They just let Corey Lee and Yainer Diaz fight it out, which I'm going to say I think was a dusty call to do that. I think he's got some affinity for Corey Lee.
Well, Corey Lee did, of course, play at Cal. His son, Darren, was a teammate at Cal.
Right, and I think that Dusty made that decision, but it doesn't give you any depth if those kids don't work out. The worst thing you can do, and having been in Seattle with Mike Zunino when we drafted him, is bring a catcher to the big leagues, bring him to the big leagues and let him play when he's not ready and say, you've got the job, because when you fail, and there's a lot to worry about at the big league level, the career can go sideways. If you think Corey Lee and Yainer Diaz are the answer, you have the obligation to protect them and let them be on the shuttle a little bit, using who you need, or maybe having one guy as your third guy and a bat. But if he's going to get real meaningful innings, he's got to be ready to do that. They are betting on that instead of the guy that's now got 2 rings, and Christian Vasquez and Martin Maldonado. That's 4 World Series rings behind the plate. I'm feeling pretty good if I got those guys. So that's the route they went, and it is what it is. But I think in handling all of that, and of course in arbitration and some of the stuff that he was doing, he decided he was going to handle the big league club in a way that he wanted to do it. He's got some people he's listening to. It's his decision. It's his club. They didn't do a bad job. There's some pieces I think they could have added. They chose not to, and that's what you roll with in the camp. But the GM priority wasn't for that. The GM's job here really isn't the big league club in the next couple of years. Oh, there's tweaks. The GM's job here is far bigger and far deeper, which is when we get to that part about candidates and what they're looking for, that's what you got to think about.
Yeah, I'm afraid to say a little bit or ask you some questions, specific questions, because I'm afraid it's going to dip into this. What should the plan be? What plan should the Astros be undertaking? Here's some GMs. I did a quick search the other day. Some GMs hired in January or February. So in 2006, February 8th of 2006, look who was hired by the Reds.
Yep.
Wayne
Krivsky.
2004, February 16th, Paul DePodesta is hired by the Dodgers. February 3rd, 1996. Now, there were some circumstances around this. Brian Cashman was hired as the general manager of the New York Yankees after Bob Watson suddenly resigned, February 3rd, 1996. Here's another interesting one. February 13th, 2002. The Expos hire Omar Minaya, but that's only because Major League Baseball had taken over the team. They had appointed Tony Tavares team president. They needed a general manager. They hire Omar Minaya. January of 1994, Joe Klein is promoted.
I remember Joe.
Yeah, Joe, who, of course, later ran the Atlantic League.
Yep.
The Tigers hired him as GM. That was an internal move. Also in January of 1994, Bill Bavasi is an internal promotion for the Angels. Then I could go way back to the 1950s. John McHale with the Braves, John Quinn from the Phillies. The Yankees also made a GM hire in January of 1959. Should we get to this next one then? This next one of what should the plan be? Should we get to that next one?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Here's some things that have come to mind while hearing you discuss this. We had this idea that the Astros would lean on an experienced baseball executive as a general manager. Of the players, and I say players meaning the candidates, not former players, but the players involved that we know are still involved, Bobby Evans is really the only one that has high-level experience.
He's actually been in the chair. He's an executive. It's done it in the assistant general manager or GM chair for quite some time.
And then my second question, or my second thought, when you look at this circle of trust that Jim Crane has with Reggie Jackson, Enos Cabell, Jeff Bagwell, and Dusty Baker, is it possible that the new hire won't have as much power, for lack of a better phrase, than some general managers would have moving into a situation? I think those are two things that really come to mind while hearing you break down this entire situation. So you can answer those later or right off the bat. But Jeremy, if Jim Crane is listening right now, what would you say to Jim Crane? What should the Astros plan be?
So, we talked about not all GM jobs are the same. They're all different, and they're all about timing, right? You can argue that Ed Wade and Bobby Heck were the right people at that time, and you can argue that Jeff Luhnow was the right person at that time as far as what he was doing at the big league level in trades and acquisitions. You can argue that James Click was the right guy to steady the ship at the time, right? And now this is really about a rebuild. And the Astros fans don't want to hear that because, you've had a decade now of success. It started back in 2008 with the hiring of Ed Wade and Bobby Heck. But this is a systemic rebuild. This isn't a rebuild of a big league team, although that's coming. This is a systemic rebuild. And what that means is that the Astros clearly, in the things beneath the major league level, went way too far when it comes to analytics on the other side. Okay, the proof is in what has come out of the system. Now they've done a very good job of moving pieces around and in adding some of the parts and the pieces to help win a World Series or to be competitive. They've done an exceptional job. But the aircraft carriers are still there, some of them, for now. And Jordan Alvarez was a pro scouting acquisition by a now fired pro scouting department. You guys know that? How many guys? Show of hands. I know we can't see you. Show of hands. If you knew that Jordan Alvarez was brought over by a scouting department in the pro side anyway, that's now been fired. Gone. If you had, the picks some of the picks that were made, some of the people that were making those picks are still here. Some of the people that are making those picks are not. It's a fact. Okay. You have systemic breakdowns in what's gone on. You have to rebuild an entire player evaluation process. That's what I'm going to call it. It's not just analytics. It's not just subjective scouting. It's not just there's a process that has to be rebuilt. And so whoever comes in here has to understand what his ideas of how he's going to build a major league club in the future, how he's going to rebuild a farm system, and what development looks like to help that get better. A general manager cannot do that by himself. A general manager has to have experience in all these areas. He has to have experience in rules and contracts. He has to have experience in player acquisition. He has to have experience in roster movements and understanding how to deal with managers and coaches and players and agents. And some of the jobs, the reason why that's the one job at the top, it's no different than moving to the top of any other company. You have to apprentice yourself at different levels along the way to get there. And then you really need to sit in the seat that's next to the seat before you take that seat, right? And some of the guys that we're talking about haven't sat in that seat. It doesn't mean they're not qualified for candidates. It just means that if I'm Jim Crane, I'm looking at somebody now, and I'm saying this maybe I'm saying this in a way to some of the people that haven't done the job yet. that this particular city is used to winning now. Is that fair? I think that's fair. That a lot of the lack of success below the major league level has been covered up by success at the major league level. I mean, let's face it, parades, we get to go all over the place in the winter, right? We're doing this stuff in the postseason. It's been a pretty good run in Houston baseball. It really has. And the city's not going to be real happy about going backwards now that they're spoiled. So Jim Crane recognizes that, and as a businessman who's built successful businesses in multiple different places, what I want, if I'm in the chair, and I don't want to pay free agents across the board. By the way, that's unsustainable. No matter what anybody tells you, paying free agents $25 million at every single position is unsustainable, and nobody's going to do that, okay? If I know that I'm coming to that time and I don't have much in the system behind me, I'm not plugging in a scout in the GM chair. I'm not plugging in a player development guy in the GM chair. I'm plugging in somebody who knows how to manage people. I'm putting in somebody who knows how to lead, somebody who knows how to communicate, somebody who has a business sense of what that stuff means from a profitability side. Reminder, this club doesn't have a president and CEO. I need somebody that can potentially advance. We talk about, now there's the president of baseball operations, the GM title. Guys, the president and the GM, president of baseball operations, the GM, GM's a buffer title. Like, if there's a president of baseball operations, he's making the decision. If there's a GM, he's making the decision. So what you used to know as traditional GM is now the president of baseball operations, but you don't have to have it. You can just slide that over. So if you slide that over and you've got a general manager, you want a general manager that's got some upward mobility here to help run that business side, which there really hasn't been. There's no president CEO right now. So you want to have that. You have to have somebody that allows Jim Crane to be an owner and do what he does that's best, which is not get in the weeds as a GM, because that doesn't help his businesses and the organizations. He's got other stuff to worry about. And you have to have somebody that can deal with the manager and understand the role in analytics and subjective scouting and player development processes and getting good people. And that requires a lot bigger government than what they have today. It doesn't mean that it has to be a 180. That's not what we're talking about. But it does have to be some change. And I need somebody, if I'm Jim Crane in that seat, that's got some experience. And if I'm a first timer, I don't want this job.
Wait a minute. This is your chance. There's one of only 30-something jobs like this. What do you mean if you're a first timer you don't want this?
Because you get one shot at this job. And from Major League Baseball standpoint, if they're looking at diversity and they want to get people in the chair, the first thing that happens, I'll just say it because it is hard on this side sometimes to see that if somebody's installed in many places, this is going to maybe a little real, but if somebody's installed in many places at a position like that, and they hire multiple people of color in other places, people say he's just hiring his friends. And it's not fair, but if you're a person of color and you take this job, you have to be given autonomy to do some things here to create, because it's your one shot. If you're somebody else who's a first-timer, it's your one shot, whether it's Brad Ausmus or not, right? And I don't want to be in a situation, if I haven't checked all those boxes here in this city without being able to plug people in the way I want. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm saying that's what has to happen. If I'm Jim Crane, I'm going to get somebody that's got experience, that's got some business sense, has run businesses before potentially, or understand that side of a profitability and what that looks like, who can embrace analytics, who understands change because it's needed, who won't make change for the sake of making change, but who will help fill in the gaps in this organization because the city of Houston is dependent on it. See, every time you do this, and this is where I will say some people that were here fell short, every time you do this and you have the name of a city across your chest, in this place, you have 7 million plus marching with you about this team, and that has to matter. And part of the biggest problems I've had with some of the people that have been in that uniform, because in these positions, because long after they're gone, the Houston Astros remain, the Seattle Mariners remain, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim remain. You have to care about the people in the city, and when you put that responsibility on your shoulders, you have to want to do it for them because they're the ones that are rooting for it, and that's where the fans come into play. And if you don't respect that, you have no place in the game. And so if I'm Jim Crane, I'm finding somebody who can keep this city moving in all facets, not just in one area, not in two, and I'm not minimizing anybody, but that's my criteria if I'm looking to hire somebody. Business sense, experience, multiple jobs and departments, network of people, can get diverse and stay diverse regardless of what that person is in that seat, and is hired on merit across the board, not because somebody told me to. That's where I'm at. And so I wanted to, if I'm looking at that answer to that question, if I'm him, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to have that set of communication, people management, energy, all that stuff come into play.
I would be worried if you're a first-time GM. This is a pretty powerful group of people that are around Jim Crane. Are you sure that you would have enough autonomy to bring the people in you want to bring in? Because we've heard Jeff Bagwell become almost like a de facto spokesperson in many ways as far as how the organization is functioning at this point. And I'm not saying that he's doing it purposely. I'm just saying that that's because he's been front and center at a couple of opportunities where we've been able to stick a microphone in front of his face. And I would have to believe that someone with experience, which we've talked about, would have the know-how, the ability, the standing to push back, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I worry if you're a first-time GM and you're trying to make your mark, and I think anybody who learns what it's like to be in a position of leadership or management, you can't please everybody. And I would have to believe that one thing someone would want was to bring in their people. And I'm worried if a first-timer would not have, enough people to bring in, but also the ability to really have a voice in what is an established and esteemed group of advisors that we seem to feel have Jim Crane's ears. I think it's a very legitimate question. And we're seeing a lot of that now with the comments on Twitter, because especially now with the name Brad Ausmus, and everybody knows Brad Ausmus was a member of those Astros teams with Jeff Bagwell, and they are very good friends. And I think that now we're starting to, people are saying, ooh, I don't know about that one, because Brad Ausmus, while smart guy, has not performed well as a major league manager. And you wonder, well, maybe is Jeff pushing him? I mean, listen, everybody has their backers. I mean, you go down this list. We could go. Bobby Evans, I think, was in San Francisco when Dusty was.
I'm positive that Bobby and Evans and Dusty were together, because that's where Bobby spent most of his entire baseball career.
How about this? Dusty Baker won last year as a manager, kicks up to the front office as a general manager. Jack
McKeon style, way back in the day.
I'm just saying.
I don't know. I think that Dusty's always been a big proponent of, you have up there, I have down here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you start crossing over some of that stuff, it becomes tough to manage. I think when you start looking at, man, how do I say this with as direct as possible? You start looking at things that take the essence of balance out in anything, whether it's analytics, whether it's player evaluation, whether it's roster construction. In other words, you scout with your heart instead of your head, that's a problem, right? You manage with your heart, you can do that, but you can't scout with and player evaluate with your heart, because you'll only see the person instead of the ability and where the player is and be ready. And I'm not saying that's happening. I'm saying that balance needs to be there. And oftentimes, scouting and general managers and front office people and player development people who are both invested in the players they bring into the organization and invest in long-term success don't get as close to it with their heart, because they have to make tough decisions. So they do it that way from the standpoint to be able to have, a little more distance, I guess, is what it is. From doesn't mean you don't want the person. It just means it still is a business, right? I mean, it's not show friends, it's show business. And if the Astros are everybody out there singing Kumbaya and we all love each other, but then all of a sudden nobody's winning, how's the city going to feel? It still goes back to that. So, I just think this job is built for somebody that has all those attributes and has worn different hats in an organization to build himself to there. Doesn't have to be a guy that's done it. I would want experience in this role, but it doesn't have to be for this team right now. But it doesn't have to be somebody that's actually done that job as long as they've worn all the hats to get there. Because anything short of that is going to be relying on people where this isn't their skill set. Jeff Bagman would be great at player development. That may be what he – okay, great. But does he understand how to build a scouting department? Right? Probably not. And it's nothing against him. Probably not, right? How about the analysts? Do the analysts understand how to be? They don't. So there's balance that needs to be had, and whoever's in this chair has to manage all those voices and still keep an eye on that. The fact it's still a business, and you have to be able to understand what the value is per win and the value of young talent from a business standpoint instead of just paying players all the time. From a front office standpoint, you have to bring players in, understand development through the system is the best way for return on your investment, and it's the most cost-effective way to acquire talent. It's a draft. And so if you're not getting that right and you're not getting other stuff, along the way, then you're going to fall down. And then you have to go pay people to extend those windows. And so you need somebody who knows how to build all of that. And what seems to be happening over there is there isn't that. And I guess I'll say this. Scouting has the vision. Scouting is all about vision. Whether it's analytical and tempered or whether it's subjective. It's all vision. Player development's responsibility is to take that vision and make that vision a reality. You take the vision and you make it a reality. That's player development's responsibility. You haven't been seeing that. You've been seeing it. You got to swing on this angle and you got to throw this way and you get this delivery. You got to pronate. I had a picture the other day talking about over-pronating. Anybody know what happens if you take a baseball and do that with your elbow as fast as you can? Show of hands, show of elbows. I mean, it's right here. It pops. You can't do that. But yet we have a laboratory that's teaching that, and we're buying into that. How does that help? That's wrong. That's not what you do. So, and the reason why is we want to make the change-up, doing a change-up. It's pronate because we want the change-up to spin this way. We want the fastball only to spin this way, and the slider's got to spin this way. So all that stuff does is put stress on your elbow because we've decided in a lab that's how you're supposed to do it. You need a GM that can see through all that, know when to incorporate it, know when not to, know when to go ahead and put other people in place that can get him the right decisions so that he can sit in the chair and be convicted about what he does and not need groupthink to make a decision. And if you've never done this job before, that's hard to do because there's so many different departments that come into play. And that's what I'd be looking for if I was Jim Crane.
I didn't realize how long Dana Brown has been with Alex Anthopoulos.
Oh, yeah, almost forever.
Yeah, dating back to Toronto.
And I think they worked together in Washington and Montreal, too. I mean, they've been together a long time. Dana's had that buffer. He's an excellent baseball guy. Excellent. Been on a number of flights with him, sat in different places and run into him all over the place at different conferences and ballparks. Great dude.
Are you comfortable with me? You said I've been silent. What did you say? I've been silent too long. What did you say?
Yeah, I've been silent too long.
So why have you been silent? Is it simply because you know a lot of the people in?
Yeah, when you it's like a kid. I mean, you can't pick. It's like a parent can't sit there and go, I like this child better than this child.
Yeah.
Right. You can't do that. And when you have these type of friends and connections and people you want to see successful in the game, it's not fair for me to go out and talk. And look, every offseason, and I mean every offseason, okay? Thank you to the Astros for being successful for this, but every offseason, we go around and the season's over, and it feels like almost, and it's not everybody, but a lot of people in baseball pay attention because we have those relationships and because I've gone through the wars with them.
Yeah.
And so, they watch and they listen. And the last thing I want to do is influence something like that one way or the other. At the same time, I got a job to do. I have a job to do. And I like my job a lot. And so when it comes to doing that job, I have to be honest about what would happen. I'll say it again, all of these guys have some level of qualification. If you're asking me what I would be looking for, that's what I gave you. But they all have some level of qualification. Jim Crane is going to have to make a decision on whether or not he wants a complete general manager, if he wants an administrator, if he wants an analytic guy, which you might as well just kept James Click if that was the case, right? I mean, you don't need to, okay? If you want somebody who's worn the hats and managed people, if you want somebody who understands how to win a World Series because they've done it before in that chair, if you want some, or in the front office, Dana Brown's got a ring. I think Bobby Evans got 3 with the Giants, right? And Michael Hill had 2. You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
so, you're looking at some guys that have some success, and Cleveland don't have any yet. They haven't won, but he has to have what he wants. I mean, is what balance do you want in that front office? And for me, I'd want somebody that had all those qualities, including business sense, some upward mobility, and some experience to steady the tide, to allow people to be themselves, and to lead in a way that gets the Astros keeps them in contention, because the city's not going to take anything less.
So I think, Jeremy, you promised to deliver the current state of the Astros, things impacting the search, and what the plan should be. We wrote them down, you mentioned them on Twitter, and we answered each and every one. That's what we do on the Extra Bases podcast, the special live edition. Now that we've got this hookup done, I think this might be the route from time to time.
I'm a fan of live, man. We do our best work on live.
And we'll get some more comments in and things like that.
There's some damage happening in Houston today. There's been some tornadoes that flew through, and so the weather team is busy.
Yeah. But they were the all-stars today.
Yeah. But this is out there now. This is out there for you to go back to. It's out there for questions. It's out there for you to listen to and watch.
Let us know. Tweet us.
I've lived here 15 years, and I've been fortunate to experience baseball here from a number of different sides. And what I will tell you is Houston gets knocked for being a sports town quite a bit. I wouldn't say that. What I would say is that because there's other stuff to do, right? If the teams aren't winning, then there's other stuff to do. But there aren't too many cities that are better to play in. That I'll tell you. And I've been in all 30.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's not too many that are better to play in. So, if any, and the fans here deserve to stay winning now that they're here. Mm-hmm. They deserve to have people who care in those seats about the city and about what it means to be a winner here. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So that's what I'd be looking for if I was Jim Crane.
All right, everybody, that is the Extra Bases podcast with Bristol and Booth. For Jeremy, I'm Jason. Of course, leave us a comment. Subscribe to the podcast. I'm going to have this posted as soon as I can. That's going to be a little behind the scenes here. It's funny, Jeremy. You talked about, yes, people have been in baseball, but they haven't done things. Like, I've been in broadcasting a long time. Now I got to figure out how to get this video onto the podcast platform and the YouTube platform. Yep. So that's kind of what we're dealing with as well.
Well, and to that vein, I show up and talk baseball, and Jason does all the hard work.
I know. It's funny that formula has worked now for
seven
years.
Yeah, 17, 18, 19, 21, 2, and 3.
Wow.
7 years.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and of course, we'll see you next time here on the Extra Bases podcast.